It is my privilege and honor to be here this morning, as I often tell people when they see me at a conference somewhere out in the United States or somewhere else. I'll say, you know, if you only can come to one of two conferences, I would pick either Ancient Mysteries or Annual Membership Congress. And I know many of you feel the same way and come back year after year. So thank you very much. You bring lots of great energy here, and we're happy to have you. It's been a great program. It is my privilege to introduce you to James Tyberonn. James has worked as a professional engineer and geologist for 33 years. As a geologist, he had the opportunity to study on every continent. A native of Arkansas, he's now a resident of Texas. But he's lived and worked circumnavigating the globe and traveling to over 85 countries in his work. He's always had a deep love for the earth and a driven interest in spirituality and metaphysics. He's devoted himself to intense metaphysical studies of varied disciplines, including understanding the energy of the living earth from both a scientific and metaphysical perspective. He's considered to be one of the world's most knowledgeable experts on earth energies, sacred sites, power nodes, crystals, healing gems, and the aura. He has been chased by hippos in Africa, rescued from a coup d'etat by the French Foreign Legion, hiked the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, rafted the Grand Canyon, and has spoken at the United Nations. He met his wife and soulmate Anne in 1978 in Brazil. A military veteran, he served his country as an officer in the U.S. Army Signal Corps. In his geological work, he has been an expatriate in Bolivia, Brazil, India, Venezuela, Gabon, Congo, Russia, United Arab Emirates, Indonesia, and Scotland. He studied gemology work while in Brazil. He speaks Spanish, Portuguese, and French, and thankfully English, since he's here today for our talk. He has a mixed Euro and Native American heritage and has completed 7 5-day vision quests in the Lakota modality, 3 earth dance, 3.5-day fasting sacred dance ceremonies, and he has had numerous sacred shamanic journeys in Mexico and South America. He's the author of 5 books, including The Second Moon of Atlantis, Auric Circuitry, Sacred Sites, Animal Consciousness, The Flashing Nature of Time, and a multi-set DVD series on auric maintenance and psychic self-defense. And he's currently working on his 6th and 7th books about metaphysical healing properties of gemstones and the untold story of Atlantis. He has a deep connection to this work, the Cayce work. He was given a copy of Edgar Cayce's biography, There Is a River, while working on the banks of the Amazon. And from that time, he's been a special spokesperson, lover, and supporter of this great work. I don't know how many of you have been to the meditation room, but every gem on that floor, from the 600-pound crystal in one corner to the 90-pound lapis in the other, was given to us by James. Now, one of the reasons I'm here today is every year, James hosts an Earth Keepers Conference. And every year, as part of that conference, he promotes ARE. Well, I was at his conference this last time, and after that conference, at which James sold 349 memberships, James has sold in excess of 1,000 memberships to the ARE. Wow. So. And he doesn't know I'm going to do this, but because of that, I'm here for a special presentation. James, if you would come on up. We have a little prize for you, and there's Jared here. I'm going to get Jared to get our photograph. Whoops. I'll get that in a second. Let me stand here so we... Jared, get our thin side over here. Okay. Jared wants to know which side that is, okay? Okay, I'm going to read this plaque to you. To James Tyberonn, with gratitude, appreciation, and love for your many years of dedication, outreach, and service, disseminating the information of Edgar Cayce and the work of ARE, we are truly grateful. Edgar Cayce's Association for Research and Enlightenment presented on behalf of the Edgar Cayce's ARE at the Ancient Mysteries Conference, October 2018. In addition to this, James, as of today, we have given you a lifetime membership in ARE. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to put this back.
Is my mic on? Can you hear me okay? I'm truly honored and touched. That means a lot to me. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, you mean a lot to us.
Thank you so much. I'm taken back by that. That was unexpected, and it is deeply, deeply appreciated. Okay, well, Edgar Cayce absolutely changed my life. I went to Brazil in 1978, and I was working as a geologist, and I was actually working 300 miles west of Manaus, which is the heart of the Amazon, on a geological site trying to determine the depth of a potassium chloride deposit. And I was the only American on the site, and a German engineer came out, and he had a stack of books that traditionally were left, you know, from one person to another to have something to do and when you weren't working. And he gave me a stack of maybe 10 books, 9 of which were Louis L'Amour Westerns. And the other one was an unusual book called There Is a River by Thomas Suger. And I read that cover to cover, and I was walking on air. And Cayce has changed my life, and I owe a tremendous debt to Edgar Cayce, and it has been my honor to work with the ARE. And I lived as an expatriate and worked as an expatriate outside the United States as a foreigner, eventually became a citizen of the world. And I would come home once a year, and I would buy books to last me a year. I'd get maybe 60, 70 pounds of books. And at one point, I had literally read every book that the ARE catalog had available. So I spent a lot of time studying the ARE, the books that were offered by the ARE, and this is an amazing organization. So I want to talk a little bit before I begin about Edgar Cayce, and this is a quote. "The life of a person endowed with such psychic gifts, such powers, is not easy. For more than 40 years now, I've been giving readings to those who come seeking help. 35 years ago, the jeers, scorn, and laughter were even louder than today. I have faced the laughter of ignorant crowds, the withering scorn of tabloid headlines, and the cold smirk of self-satisfied intellectuals. But I have also known the wordless happiness of little children who've been helped, the gratitude of fathers, mothers, and friends, and I believe that the attitude of the scientific world is gradually changing along these subjects." How many of you have met ridicule for the beliefs that you have when they become expansive? Almost all of us. I'm a native of Arkansas, and of course all of you recognize that Arkansas is considered the intellectual capital of the United States. But seriously, we had a great education process. We studied the Greek philosophers like Socrates and Aristotle. But what is unique about Arkansas is the quartz content. Many of you may not be aware that Arkansas is the largest unbroken singular strata of quartz crystal on the planet. And I lived among the crystals as a boy. My father worked with the University of Arkansas, and we would go to Lake Ouachita almost every weekend. And there would be these enormous tables along the way in Hot Springs of crystals that were just enormous, and they fascinated me. So I lived in the crystals for the first 22 years of my life, and then I moved to Brazil into the other enormous area of crystals. Brazil is an absolute cornucopia of not just quartz crystal, but of virtually every gemstone. And I lived in Brazil for 7 years, and after Brazil, I moved to Africa. I lived in Africa for 7 years, and then I worked in the Middle East. I worked in India, I worked in Russia. And all of that time, I studied Edgar Cayce, and it was a comfort, because living as a foreigner, I do speak 4 languages, but I didn't learn them before I went there. I learned them the way that most people really learn languages, as you get immersed into a society and you have to learn how to speak it. And part of my issue was that I was always much bigger than the people that I worked alongside in Brazil, and I always looked like an American. And we are not the most popular nationality outside the United States. But I learned to communicate non-verbally out of necessity. I was in a situation where I had to be cautious, I had to be careful, and I had to be able to look into the eyes of a taxi driver and make sure he's not going to drive me to the far side of town and mug me or something. So I spent a lot of time learning languages, but also learning to read people. And I had my psychic opening in Brazil after reading Edgar Cayce, and after that it was just a flurry. And it was very interesting that after I'd been in Brazil for a year, working as a geologist with Petrominas and Petrobras in the Ministry of Minerals, they started changing my salary to where I was receiving 25% of my salary in local currency called the Cruzeiro. The only problem was that currency devaluated 400% per year. And so if you had $100 in the bank at the end of the year, you had like $20 in the bank. So you had to buy something with it. Well, Brazil is a cornucopia of gemstones. My landlord was a gemstone dealer because people, and virtually everybody in Brazil were, because you could not save the money. They either had to buy gold, gemstones, or real estate. And so to avoid losing my money, I started buying gemstones. And at the same time, I'm reading Edgar Cayce's information on gemstones. And so that is how I became involved in crystals and gemstones and learning their properties. I've got a photograph of myself with Jose Luis, my landlord, and we're at a dining table in my house, and I'm buying gemstones, and there's literally a pile of aquamarines, of emeralds, of opals, of topaz, of amethyst, and it was just amazing. And after a while, I began to be able to ascertain the difference in certain stones, even though they may be the same color and exactly the same type. Some of them would have an inner light, and I began to almost feel like I could communicate with them. And so for the 6.5 years that I was in Brazil, I collected a great variety of gemstones, and I began to wear them. So, and I developed an understanding, I think, of how they work. And I am working on a book now that I hope to have finished within a year on gemstones. It's been a long time project, and I hope to get that finished soon. So I have this great debt to Edgar Cayce. He really was a truly incredible man whose life work was not easy. All of you, I'm sure, have met with some form of ridicule or rejection. My family was actually quite proud of me when I was an engineer, but when I became involved in metaphysics, they still love me, but they pray for me now. And so, and Edgar Cayce really has improved the life of millions. I was confused. I was a born-again Baptist in Arkansas. My grandfather was a minister. My uncle was a minister, and my father was a deacon, and we went to church every time the doors were open. And I never could accept or truly understand the idea of hell and damnation, and it confused me quite a bit. And so the Baptists believed once saved, always saved. Well, I got saved 3 different times, and it became an embarrassment because I joined the church the first time when I was about 7, because all my friends did. And then when I was about 12, another friend of mine that was young went up and said that they realized they hadn't really been saved, that they hadn't had enough faith. And I thought, oh my God, that's me. I don't like going to church. And so I went through the process 3 times, and finally they said, don't worry about it, you're saved. And I was looking for answers. And when I read There Is a River, I had that eureka moment. I remember during testimonials growing up in church, people would stand up, and this is Arkansas, and they'd say, you know, I was out picking cotton, and I asked the Lord to come in, and I had this incredible moment. I had that when I read Edgar Cayce. I had that this is the truth. This is the way it works. The expansive ideas of reincarnation. And so Edgar Cayce's work uniquely bridged the spiritual gap between Orthodox Christianity and the greater enlightening truth of reincarnation and karma. And I don't think anyone else could have done that with the same finesse, with the same quality, because he was a man of remarkable integrity and he walked his talk. And he himself found it difficult to accept the concepts of reincarnation. The reason Edgar Cayce's books are in biblical vernacular is because he read the Bible every year of his life, and that gets programmed. And so when the channeling that he did comes through the conscious mind, it picked up that vernacular. But what a remarkable man. And so what I would like to do is ask you all to give an enthusiastic round of applause to all members of the Edgar Cayce team. I'd like to ask the board members, the staff, the volunteers of this event, and members of the ARE and Atlantis University and the Edgar Cayce Foundation to stand. And let's give them applause. And so I'd like to say thank you for your service to Kevin, to John, to everyone that was involved in organizing this event. This is truly not only church, this is also an area where we're starting to learn the true nature of reality, of life. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Now, Kevin mentioned the crystal. This is actually the crystal that I bought and is now up in the meditation room. And I've spoken to Kevin and some of the others about it. And this crystal, which is a little over 600 pounds, is a double terminated crystal. Right along this edge here, which you can't see in the photograph, there is actually a twin coming out of it, and it is double terminated, meaning it has an incredible amount of energy that flows through it, not unlike a 5-ogle crystal. Now, Edgar Cayce has a reading that I'll show later in the presentation. But Cayce says that the spiritual law of one, the Atlanteans, used crystals, and this is a verbatim reading, used crystals to communicate with the divine, to communicate with the realm of saints out of body. And so crystals have an incredible utility that is not recognized yet by our mainstream academia. Crystals can create multidimensional fields. Crystals will absorb energy. Crystals of quartz are silicon dioxide. And silicon dioxide, how many of you are familiar with the star tetrahedron? Some of you. The star tetrahedron is basically the shape of our Auric field energy, our light body. The molecule of quartz is a star tetrahedron. And it has been theorized and now proven, or accepted, I should say, that occasionally in the silicon dioxide, there is when they form in that group complexity, in that group uniformity, there will be a missing silicon atom. And Dr. Marcel Vogel correctly theorized, and it now has been agreed by most academics, that missing silicon atom is the reason that quartz can record data. How many of you have computers? Every one of your computers has a silicon chip. Every one of them. The reason your phone works is a silicon chip taken from quartz. Hewlett-Packard, 2 years ago, developed what they called a super quartz chip capable of storing data for over 1 million years. And some say that it can go as high as infinity, 10 million years. Imagine that. Quartz records data. That's why your computer works. And so if enough people go up into that meditation room, of course they will, say their prayers, meditate, lightly touch that quartz crystal, and it's okay, I've spoken to Kevin, you can lightly touch it. We ask you not to touch the amethyst piece that's in the corner, but if you touch that quartz with high intention, that will be recorded. Even if you just meditate in the room, that will be recorded. That is actually the way I think major sacred sites work. How many of you have been to Lake Louise, Canada? Absolutely an astonishing place, but if you look at the geology, that's a giant crystal. The unique aspect of Lake Louise in Banff is the color of the water. Would you agree with that? A stunning turquoise. The reason it is that color is because it contains glacier silt. Glacier silt of granite. And granite is 40% quartz. I often tell people that granite, feldspar, and quartz are often taken for granted. and rightly so. But when you have these areas like that, they are crystals. And the water, that glacier silt is what? It's silicon. And because it is permanently dispersed in the fluid, it becomes a non-Newtonian fluid. Water is a Newtonian fluid. It has no viscosity. It has no attraction beyond its plastic viscosity and yield point in scientific terms. The water at Lake Louise is non-Newtonian because it has permanent particulate. And another example of a plastic fluid would be milk. It has that permanent diffusion in there, that permanent dispersion. So when you have that type of water with silicon in it, it becomes a liquid crystal. It will hold heat longer. It will hold an electrical charge. And so that is, and if you look at virtually every sacred site, there is something about the geology, the mineralogy that attracted people there. And quartz, crystallization, granite, all of these incredible minerals I'll talk about in this presentation. And in the second presentation that I'm going to do right after later this morning will be about the fall of Atlantis. And that will be, I've got some information that is unique, and I think I have now found the tie-in that I was looking for to the Edgar Cayce readings. So I would like to ask all of you, before you go home, how many of you live outside of Virginia Beach? Quite a few. Before you leave today, perhaps even during the break, go up there and touch that crystal. Now, what I'm telling you, and what I sincerely believe, and I've worked with crystals for years. I grew up in Arkansas, and I lived the next 7 years in Brazil. So in retrospect, my life makes a lot more sense than it did when I was going through it. And I think that's true for all of us. But I have certainly always had that attraction to crystals and to quartz. And a passion for them and an understanding of how they work. Now, this is another interesting point. I found a reading by Edgar Cayce, and I actually have it in my presentation, where he says that the original godlings, the souls that came into the earth plane, merged their energies into the earth kingdom. There were souls who merged their energy into crystals, merged their energies into the elements, into the plant kingdom. And I certainly think that I merged my energy into the crystal energy. But the fact that he said that provides a tremendous clarity to me on the way that these work. And so what I believe will occur is that that crystal is big enough that when everyone puts their energy into it, it will be not only just absorbed and received, it will amplify it back. And I don't mean project it back, I mean amplify it back. Let's say you put in 10 units of energy, it's going to give you back 100 units of energy. And so with everyone touching that energy, touching that crystal, the energy of that crystal will be so enormous, so incredible, that will encompass all of Virginia Beach. And Virginia Beach is a sacred site. Cayce readings indicate that this was specifically chosen because it was a portal of what he referred to as the spiritual white brotherhood. There are people that talk about a vortexial energy being in this state park right behind the ARE. What I suggest to you is that the center of the vortexial portal is here, because of the energy that you project and the energy that is recorded through that enormous tool, that enormous living conscious crystal. And crystals are absolutely alive. Everything is alive. But crystals have a higher vibration because they're formed through heat and pressure. When we complete our process and become crystalline as a vibration, it will be because pressure. It will be because of the challenges that we met. Life is not easy. And that's a noble truth. Life can be difficult, but it is only through facing our challenges that we transcend them. And that is how we grow. On the other side of the veil, a difficult life is desired. When we come into a life and it's all easy, which is, according to Cayce, about one out of every 4 or 5 lifetimes, we come back and just sort of relax. But in most of the other ones, we take on challenges. Why? Because we are here in the University of Duality, the University of Earth, to learn responsible co-creation so that we can become one again with Creator. Does that make sense? And so crystals on the earth absolutely represent the highest form of molecular atomic arrangement. And quartz is incredibly unique. I'll talk about some of their properties. Now I'm going to have to ask your help so that I don't get off on a tangent. I've got about 80 slides to go here, which means I need to do about a slide every minute for this one. So I'll try to stay on track because I've got a lot of information that I want to share. But the point that I want to make here is that this crystal absolutely is a powerful, powerful amplification tool. And the Atlanteans, as Cayce said, used quartz crystals to interface with other worlds, to interface with the divine, and to channel. And, you know, a lot of people maybe think that the Edgar Cayce information since he came out in the 1930s is old. It is not old. It is just now evolving and should be recognized. The ARE is absolutely the most credible. The ARE is the most credible spiritual metaphysical organization on the planet. Absolutely. It is at the ARE, and I've been involved in all sorts of metaphysics. I studied them. I studied the Seth material. I studied Rob saying Lampa, the Rosicrucians, you name it. The ARE has the integrity and the humility. You don't see big egos here. You see warmth. You see openness. You see an acceptance. But there is not that haughty-taughty ego, and there is not that New Age metaphysical woo-woo stuff. And you get it. And you know, and it's easy in metaphysics to become delusional. But Edgar Cayce keeps it on track. And I studied all of it. And I've worked at consciousness my entire life. I experienced other realities in a sacred way. I've always been a searcher. I have done LSD, ayahuasca, peyote, mushrooms, the whole gamut, but I did it in a sacred way, never recreational, always supervised with teachers. And so I have been on the other side. I have experienced that other realm. I also did a series of 7 vision quests where I fasted for 5 days. The first 3, I did it in the Lakota modality in Arizona. And I had a series of dreams where Native Americans started coming to me and telling me to do a vision quest. I was living in Africa at the time. I didn't know what a vision quest was. And when I transferred back to the United States for a while, I thought, well, I'm going to do a vision quest. And so I found a shaman who had been raised on a Lakota reservation. And it was interesting, he was half Lakota, half Jewish, carrying that interesting bloodline, that Christos bloodline. And so I fasted in the Lakota modality. The first 3 days there was no water or food. The entire 5 days there was no food. It was actually 6 days because I had to make prayer ties, which is a traditional way of saying prayers. You take a sacrament of tobacco, put it in a small piece of cloth, tie it on a string, and say a prayer with it. And you have to do it nonstop for 444 ties. And so that took me an entire day with my big thick fingers trying to get it. And then when I got finished, I had this big mess that I couldn't untangle, and Yellowbird made me untangle it before I could start. So I did for 7 years a vision quest. If you are accepted after the first one, they invite you back to complete 4 years, and that's mandatory. If you give your commitment for 4 years, you do it once a year. The first year I did it in Arizona. The second year I did it in Tecate, Mexico, on a Yaqui Indian reservation. The third year I did it in Red Rock National Forest. The fourth year I did it on top of San Francisco Peaks. I don't know if you know, it's a very, very sacred place. Nothing happened the first year, outside I lost a lot of weight. And the second year in Mexico, on the Yaqui reservation, the wind started blowing, and I was just covered. It was a complete dust bowl, and I was covered head to toe in dust, 40, 50 mile an hour winds. Came very, very close to quitting. I was still working in my engineering job, and I would always plan this around Christmas because nobody was looking for me at that time. I could escape. And I would plan it so that I ended up on the December solstice. Nothing happened that year. My third year, I was doing it in outside of Sedona, Arizona. The fourth night, it snowed. I mean, it was cold. And I was laying on the ground thinking, what on earth am I doing out here at my age? And to lay it on the ground, and nothing's happening, and I was really frustrated. And after the fourth day, the sun started coming out. And it was interesting about Sedona because it would snow and it'd get really cold in the nighttime, but in the daytime it'd get up to 50, 60 degrees. And so I was so happy for that sun to come out. And I opened my eyes, and right in front of me, I saw a Native American shaman. Closed my eyes, he was still there. And I won't go into a great detail, but that was a very powerful experience for me because I had achieved a vision in a sacred way without the use of any kind of plant or anything. It was simply by fasting. And I had an astonishing experience. I spoke with him. His name was Red Feather. He had a mountain lion with him. And he told me to get up and walk with him. And so you're not supposed to leave your prayer circle, your prayer tie circle. But he said, no, it's okay. And about that time, I'm high up on a place called Shaman's Dome, interestingly enough, on sacred land. And I could see Yellowbird. Yellowbird would come out and see me once or twice a day and say prayers and sage my prayer thing. And this was my third year with him. And I could see his truck about half mile away from my vista. And just as I'm having my vision, he pulls his truck over and gets out and starts singing the visioning song, as if he knew. And then when he got up closer, and then he finally came up to me, he had a rattlesnake skin. And he told me that when he had been driving up, even though it was snow and all the reptiles had gone into hibernation, he ran over a 4-foot rattlesnake. And he said it was a gift from spirit because the snake changes their skin. And he said it was an acknowledgement from Spirit that I had achieved my vision, that I was now growing into a different person. And so I worked at learning the nature of consciousness. I really worked at it from the time of being a confused teenager, from the time of being in Brazil to being in Africa and all these places. I really always wanted to understand the nature of reality and the purpose of life. And so those played a very, very key role as well. And so that was an incredibly interesting experience. I'm getting my signal that I need to move on a little bit. I do tend to sidetrack. Now, this is interesting. This is Ray Pinto. I had a dream about a crystal that I thought was similar to what they used in Atlantis. I had the first dream about this, and this is the man that makes them for me. I speak fluent Portuguese because I lived in Brazil 7 years, and this is a 5-oval crystal. This has 144 facets, and 12 is, that's of course 12 squared. And I think this is the type of crystal that the Atlanteans used on a personal level. And this is optical grade quartz. It has 144 facets around it. I have the very first one ever made, and it was this man that made them for me. He is Brazilian, of course, and a remarkable man. This is Raphael Venturini, and this is his father. Here. This is Wilson Venturini, Raphael Venturini, and this is Danny, who is the organizer of the Tucson Mineral Show. When you go to Tucson, it's like being in Brazil. I mean, all of the crystal mines that are down in Brazil, and then you also have the people from Arkansas that have the crystal mines. But the big crystal that is upstairs just now was actually mined, cut, and polished by the Venturinis, by Raphael and Leonardo, and that's the father, Wilson Venturini. There is a 30-foot. How many of you have been to the Bellagio Casino in Las Vegas? Have you noticed the big crystal that's inside there? This is the man that made it right here. He's the man that cut it. Incredible guy. And this is all of us having dinner a couple of weeks ago in Denver. That's me. And all of these are Venturinis. And this is, of course, Ray Pinto. His formal name is Don Raimundo Quintero Pinto. Don is just like sir or Mr., a term of respect. Incredible man, absolutely incredible man. So why did Cayce recommend gemstones? And he says that we find, now I'd like to clarify here. In this sentence here, he says the crystal and the gemstone. I added the word crystal, and I'll tell you why. Cayce refers, and I've got multiple examples of where Cayce refers to a crystal as a stone. He refers to the fire stone, he refers to the Tuaui stone, and he refers to the white stone, all of which he clearly identifies as crystals. And so all gemstones are crystals. They're crystalline. And he says, we find that the gemstone crystal has a helpful influence if carried or worn about the body, not as an omen, not merely as a good luck piece or good luck charm, but rather the source of those vibrations. The source of those vibrations that are needed as helpful influences for the entity and are well to be kept close to the body. Now, had that come from anyone else other than Edgar Cayce, I might not have believed it, because it's pretty fantastic information. Gemstones are tools. Why did Cayce recommend them? They provide protection, spirituality, enhancement, strength, mental clarity, health, emotional well-being. According to Edgar Cayce, the spiritual law of one used crystals to communicate with the divine, to interface with other worlds, and the Atlantean also used the attributes of quartz in its ability to absorb, condense, and refine light. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the second presentation, as well as amplify energy. I believe that phi crystals are thought amplifiers. And I'll talk about those in the second presentation a little bit, but I think that's how the Atlanteans use them. Now, there are a lot of things happening on our planet today that require us to now be responsible for auric integrity. The etheric light body that we carry around ourselves is perhaps our true essence. How many of you are familiar with the aspect of antimatter? You've heard it. You know, in CERN, Switzerland, they have an incredible device that interfaces into the realm of antimatter and can actually create anti-electrons, right? So modern academia, modern science believe that physical universe, that physical matter represents how much of the planet, how much of the cosmos? Anybody want to guess? Yes? 5%. 5 to 7%. Correct. Which means that 95% is dark matter or antimatter. So, this is a thought. What if our chakras are particle accelerators like the one in CERN, Switzerland, and connects us to the antimatter realm, also known as the angelic realm? What if that other realm that occupies 95% of the cosmos is our source? What else is it out there for? And so the ability to experience life in the physical plane has its incredible purpose. I believe, and I'm going to talk about the timelines of Atlantis in the second presentation, but just as a quick snippet, I believe that when the godlings, when our souls first entered the earth plane, according to Cayce, 10.5 million years ago, and how old is the earth? 4.5 billion with a B years old. I believe that when we entered the earth plane, it was a non-polar plane. That there was not duality, that there was not opposites. I think in physical matter, opposites exist, but they do not exist in a 0-point plane. 0 point means there are no poles. And so the original earth was, in my opinion, a non-polarity realm where the godlies came in and experienced it. Now, there's something else that Cayce said. Cayce said that when we first came, we didn't really manifest physically. We were in etherical spiritual form, right? All of you are aware of that? Something interesting happened, according to Cayce, 107,000 years ago. And that was the first male-female. Before that, we were androgynous. So what does male-female indicate? Duality. Duality. I think that the firmament that surrounded the earth plane and formed a non-polarity realm broke up, and we entered the realm of duality. Opposites existed, male, female, good, bad, light, dark. And we became involved in the university of duality. And Edgar Cayce teaches that we are here as the testing ground. We're here to learn responsible co-creation. And in the University of Duality, there's an incredible doctor who makes house calls. Dr. Karma, the cause of law and effect. And that is a great teacher. So we are here in the University of the Earth to learn responsible co-creation. Now, there's many things that are happening on the earth right now where I think it is essential that everyone become very, very aware of how to operate your auric energy, your etheric body, the body that you're going to have in the angelic realm, the body that you're going to have in the antimatter realm that occupies 95% of the known cosmos. And that is something that we need to become aware of and learn how to operate. There is an increase in frequency on the earth. I believe that in 2012, we expanded to 12 dimensions. Most people woke up on December 21st, 2012 and saying, what was the big deal? Nothing happened. The humanity did not ascend, and that's a fact. We have not ascended, but the earth shifted, and the earth has shifted many times. I believe that we now have access to 12 dimensions, that we now have 12 physio-chakras, that we now have 12 strands of DNA. And I believe that solar radiation is the mechanical driver of the earth shift. I believe there is a faster rotation taking place now in the inner core of the earth. And that results in a quickening of time. I believe that the global warming that's taking place now is because there is a quickening between the rotation of the inner mantle, the inner core of the earth, and the outer core of the earth, and they go in opposite directions. They go in opposite directions. The spin of the inner core is say clockwise, and the outer core is counterclockwise. And isn't it interesting how the descendants of the Atlantean scientist priests, the Druids, built stone circles in which there was counter spins. How many of you have been to Avebury? Avebury has the giant circle and then two inner circles, which spin in counterclockwise motion. All of the energy above the equator is in a counterclockwise spin. All of it below the equator is clockwise. And it is interesting how the Native Americans, when you do a vision quest or a sweat lodge or certain earth dances, which I was involved in, circulate counterclockwise around the medicine wheel 7 times. Who else does that? The Muslims are required to take a Hajj in at least one time in your life. And I worked in the Middle East a number of years. And when they get to Mecca, which is a platonic solid, it's a cube with a meteoric crystal inside it, they circulate 7 times counterclockwise. In South America, and I've done the plant medicines in a sacred way there in the ceremony, the indigenous tribes, the Ayamar, the Quechua, circulate clockwise. Water. There's a place in Peru that's right on the equator, and you can watch them drain water below the equator, and it goes clockwise, and above the equator, it goes counterclockwise. And so it's a very interesting phenomenon. And I just want to add, we are in a time right now of incredible polarity, divisiveness, politics, and that is because we are in a phase of crucible energy. All unresolved energies are surfacing right now. Absolutely surfacing right now. Why? Because we have to confront them, or we have the opportunity to confront them before the coming golden age that Edgar Cayce spoke about. John Van Auken wrote a book called 2038. I think 2038 is a key year. But I think between now and 2026, and I'm basing this on astrology, we are going to be in an incredible divisive time. I don't even watch the news anymore because there is a thought form attached to everything that makes it nasty, that makes it made, and if you get involved in that thought form, you'll get pulled in it. It's just like becoming an avid sports fan. If you're following a certain team and then they get defeated and you feel all down and out about it, and you get caught into collective group energies. And that is why it is so essential for you to be a part of a spiritual organization like the ARE, because in this room, in this energy, in this organization, this incredible organization, there is a collective thought form that we all feed into, and there is a protection in that. And I'm going to talk with the remaining time I have about auric integrity, and it is an essential knowledge. It is a forgotten science, and it is more important now as the earth shifts in 2012. I talk a lot to people about the grid. Sacred geometry is the fabric of the cosmos, and there is a grid work around the earth, and I believe it shifted in 2012 to a greater complexity. I explain the grid as being Windows 2012. It's simply it can be compared to a computer program that enables more programs, more dimensional access. And we are in that process now. 2026 is the year in which we can start to reharmonize again. But you need to learn the art of auric integrity and maintenance during this time, because of that crucible astrology, intense, confrontational, unresolved energies are surfacing by design so that we can confront them and resolve them. There is a purge, and we are also in an extremely low gravity cycle, and gravity does have cycles. We are in a period of quickening time with the two circulations of the mantles. And so it is really important that you understand auric maintenance. And that is why I think gemstones and crystals and being part of a group collective thought energy, a group collective field, is essential now. The crystalline age, I believe that grid that I spoke about is a 144 double pentadodecahedron. Now that sounds complex, but it is an absolute geometric form that has 144 points. And that's why I think that is the absolute form. And Edgar Cayce also spoke about the fifth body type emerging after 1998. And according to Carl Sagan, the only element capable of supporting our biology, which is currently carbon-based because it has 4 valence points. The only other one is silicon. And so if we shift into a new body type, whether it be a etheric or eventually as physical, we'd still have the basic form, but we would have a much lighter energy. Silicon is the base element of quartz, silicon dioxide. And so according to Carl Sagan, the only other element capable of supporting our biology is silicon. And Edgar Cayce predicted that a fifth body type, a fifth race, a fifth root race would emerge after 1998. So what is the activity? What is the driver of the shift? It is solar activity. There have been more X-class solar radiation events in the last 20 years than there has been in all the time that they were recorded previously. So what happens during solar activity? Solar winds, flares, and X-class coronal mass ejections bombard the planet with billions and billions and billions of tons of anionic charges from nitrogen. And that here is from NASA. This is anionic plasma that is now circulating our Earth. And that is on the NASA website. Now, Dr. Bernice Barlow did a study and wrote a book about sacred sites. And it's easy not to notice, but in that book, there's about a 3-page section where she talks about Native American vision questing sites. Was it Gary David that was talking last night about a blowhole in Chaco Canyon. That rang a bell for me because blowholes exude anionic energy, and that is referenced in Dr. Barlow's book. And anionic energy is, even though I hate to use the word negative, it is the negative charge, but anionic energy is very, very relevant. And studies done in universities showed that if they took candidates, if they took volunteers and put them in a room of ionic generators and shifted the normal ionic ratio, which is about 4 to 3, anionic to cationic, negative to positive, to 6 to 1, anionic to cationic, people began hallucinating. People began having visionary experiences. And that tells me that the Native Americans knew that. And they went to blowholes, and they went to energies where the anionic energy was powerful, waterfalls. The shoreline here at Virginia Beach is jam-packed full of anionic energy. And now we have tons and tons and tons of anionic energy coming onto our planet. And that is changing the way that we perceive reality, because anionic energy stimulates, as does quartz, the pineal gland, which is our eye into the angelic realm, our eye into multidimensionality. I believe that we now have 12 chakras. John Van Auken talks about that. I believe that we are switching to 12-strand DNA because of the 144 double pentadodecahedron grid program that we're on in this purposed illusion called the Earth, which we all create together. And we are now developing a greater arena of chakras. I believe that we will have 12 physio, which forms 1 to make 13, that we have 20 etheric chakras. Forming the 33. The 12 plus 1 plus 20 is equal to 33. And I believe that these are the drivers. I believe that everything that's happening now is purposed, and we are in an exciting time, an incredible time. The coronal mass ejections, as I mentioned, are projecting billions of tons of charged matter into the atmosphere, and that is the driver of the shift. I'm going to move a little faster now. It may be too late already. Because I want to get a little bit to the stones. In the ionic ratio shift, thought is manifested more rapidly, and so you must be the wise steward of your thoughts. Now, Auric mechanical equalization. You need to be more and more responsible for this field that you carry because it has a circuitry. There is an Auric circuitry and a lattice. And you know what happens to divers when they go too deep, right? There's an implosion. Now, if the Schumann resonance of the Earth is increasing, which science is arguably reviewing, just as the Ovid mechanical equalization occurs in heat and pressure, the same basic process occurs in the human aura. Examples would be the pressurized airplane cabins and power nodes increasing the Schumann resonance. Now, I tell people that when I lived in Africa, we used to get 2 holidays a year because we couldn't buy much. We lived in Gabon, and I worked in the Congo and Angola and South Africa and Cameroon, Ghana, Algeria. And I would go, my wife is British, and we would go to the UK and spend most of our time in Glastonbury. Glastonbury was such an incredible place. But I found that after a few days in Glastonbury, I needed to get out of there. That instead of being euphoric, I felt tired. And the same thing would happen in almost all of the power nodes that I was going to. And this is what I think. I think that, and this is arbitrary numbers to make my point. The auric field is encased in a sheath called an ovid, and it has a circuitry, and it has a non-Hertzian. I used Hertz here, but it has a non-Hertzian inner energy. It's like a bubble. And if you go to a place where the energy is significantly higher, what's going to happen? It's going to implode. And when your auric field loses its circuitry, when it implodes, you bleed energy. And you start getting tired, you start getting depressed, and all that euphoria is lost. And I was concerned about why that would happen in Glastonbury, and it came to me that this is the reason. Auric fracturing can occur through mechanical equalization. It also occurs in plane flights. If you get above, the Schumann resonance occurs from the surface of the Earth to the stratosphere at 30,000 feet. And that is what regulates our heartbeat. NASA had to put ionic generators in the space shuttle in order to regulate the organ function of the astronauts, because they found when they got outside of the Schumann resonance of that 7.83 Hertzian field, that their organs began to malfunction, began to not operate as regularly. And so when you're in an airplane and you're in the stratosphere, which is a cationic energy at 38,000 feet, and you've got a metallic fuselage reflecting back the anionic charge of the Schumann resonance that regulates your organs, when you land on the other end, that's why you have jet lag. But you not only have jet lag, you have a fractured aura. You're bleeding energy. And so there are certain things you can do to minimize that. 3-4 hour plane flights aren't so bad, but you start taking 9, 10, 11, 12-hour plane flights, and you're going to have a really fractured aura. And remember what I said about the spin of the northern hemisphere as opposed to the southern hemisphere? When you fly from the north to the south, you're also going to have a different kind of auric disruption that you're going to have to adjust to. And when your aura is bleeding, you're going to lose energy, you're going to fall into a spiral of depression, and you are vulnerable to attachments, the thought form attachments. I told you that I did a series of vision quests. I went to Tecate, Mexico, and I fasted for 5 days, and that was the hardest one. I was covered in dust. And when I finished, Yellowbird took me to a Yaqui elder by the name of Don Gennaro. How many of you read the Carlos Castaneda series of books? Don Gennaro is in that series. And when I met him, he was 80 years old. And he was a Yaqui peyote shaman. I did not use any peyote or anything in my questing. I simply fasted. But when I came out and Yellowbird took me to meet Don Gennaro, first of all, it was very interesting because Yellowbird didn't speak Spanish. I do. And Don Gennaro, who lived in Tecate on the Yaqui reservation, spoke Spanish. But Don Gennaro would speak to Yellowbird, and Yellowbird had wanted me to be the interpreter. But Yellowbird and Don Gennaro were talking English, Spanish, and completely answering one another appropriately. I thought that was very interesting. Don Gennaro had just gotten back from Australia on a tour, interestingly enough, with Dr. Bernice Barlow, and Yellowbird had been on it as well. That's how they met. But the Yaqui are more into wizardry than spirituality, or at least Don Gennaro was. And when I was sitting there, after being vulnerable, Don Gennaro did something that really confused me. And he did this thing, it made a sound, and he sent these fireballs right into my stomach. And I was sick, really, really sick for 2 weeks after that. And I didn't understand why he would do that. And then afterward, I realized, to try to put a good spin on it, he was teaching me through the lesson of hard knocks, never to leave my auric field wide open. But I was literally sick. Graham Hancock told me about his wife encountering a psychic attack that made her sick for a number of months after they had been in Brazil for a while and were doing plant medicine. And so the art of auric maintenance is absolutely imperative in this time. And this is what I believe an intact aura looks like, what I call the Mercana. I believe it has 12 plus 1 physio chakras and 20 etheric chakras, forming the 33. And I have a DVD series called The Metatronic Keys that teaches this in great detail. This is actually what I'm giving you now in about an hour. I usually teach in about 6 hours and involve exercises, but that's in the DVD course, and it is available on my website. So Auric integrity is absolutely essential in this new time. And the ability to co-create is diminished if your aura is leaking. All of you need to know what operates the aura, what breaks down the aura, what solves the aura. And I'm going to show you my take on that. And it is a lost science. When your auric field is open, unprotected, as Don Gennaro so ruthlessly taught me, is that when your auric field is open, you can bleed energy, you're less capable of focus, of manifestation, you're more easily fatigued, you're prone to overreactions, you become delusional, unclear, erroneous thinking. You can have downward spirals, you can have emotional lows, you're more easily upset and rattled, and you're subject to negative attachments. When someone is trying to control you, they actually extend an energy from their third chakra to your third chakra and begin to drain energy from you. And I've experienced that many times in Brazil before we knew what it was and before my wife and I knew how to handle it. In a real sense, I had an on-the-job training for 7 years when I lived in Brazil, and then 5 years when I lived in Africa on how to handle psychic attacks, because we dealt with them. We were in the land where people believe in anism, believe in voodoo, and we got attacked several times. And that was when I was having my psychic awakening, and I realized now it was a setup. It was a contractual plan for me to learn how these things work. And I absolutely learned it. We got caught in a coup d'etat, as Kevin mentioned, in Africa. And it was absolutely horrific. In the country we lived in Africa, was Gabon, there was no majority tribe. Now, in South Africa, for example, everyone's a Zulu. And so they're on the same page, speak the same language. In Gabon and Congo, there's 20 tribes, all of which speak different languages, all of which are essentially political rivals. In Gabon, the president was Bongo. He was a puppet put in place by the French. And interestingly, during the revolution, the coup d'etat, the French took both sides. So they were still in power, behind the scenes either way. But they started burning down the city. They took captives, put motorcycle tires around them, filled them with gasoline rags, and set them on fire. And it was, I'm telling you, a type of fright that I have never experienced in our life. And we were trapped. The American embassy did nothing. On the third day, the French sent in the Foreign Legion. And where I lived in Port-Gentil, with the ocean it was a peninsula, the ocean on 3 sides and a swamp on the 4th side, so you couldn't get out. And Foreign Legion parachuted in and took the city back for a while. And they took my son and wife, Bobby and Ann, onto a plane and flew them out, and they left the men there, but they had us guarded. But up until those 3 days, it was interesting to watch the levels of fear. Some people absolutely melted, had a huge trauma that they never really recovered. Of course, you can see I'm absolutely over it, but it was a great lesson on fear. Edgar Cayce called fear the great destroyer. And fear absolutely fills your body full of toxins. And we were in that situation where we were hidden and huddled until the Legion came in. And I'm telling you, I was so happy to see those guys come in. absolutely an amazing time. We had, before that happened, we had another fearful incident where Kevin mentioned the hippo incident. When I first got to Africa, and we lived in Gabon, everyone had to drive four-wheel drive because there was the only way you could really get out was to go on the beach, and they had a lovely beach. So we were driving along the beach one day, and I looked out in the ocean, and I saw this enormous hippopotamus. I mean, it was huge, you know, and you have no idea what they're like till you see them. And at that time, I had only been in Africa about 6 weeks, and I did not realize that more people are killed by hippopotamus than in Africa. And as I say, hippos kill more people than any other animal in Africa. So I saw another friend of mine that was on the beach, and I said, Cayce, I'm going to go back and get my camera. Don't let those hippos escape. So I drove back to the house, got my video. It was one of the big bulky things back in the 80s. Drove back, and here I am. I grabbed my camera, and they're out in the water, and I walk right up to them. And I'm filming these hippos, and then that thing lifted its head up, and I thought, whoa. And I started backing up, and then Ann and I and our son Bobby was about 6 months old. They went back underwater, and we're sitting there, and Ann had a moment of female intuition, and she said, we need to get out of here. That hippo is about to charge us. All of a sudden, there's this giant hippo, and we got up and started running, and by this time, there was a crowd of about 30 people. And as I say, hippos kill more people than any other animal in Africa. And they're vegetarians. They just bite you in half to get rid of you. And this thing was enormous. I mean, it was at least 10 feet long, and it was huge, a head bigger, wider than me. And I grabbed Bobby, 6 months old at the time, and Ann, and we started running, and it didn't stop. And it got right up behind us and then just stopped. I thought that was an angelic intervention. Once they get you in focal vision, they usually kill you. So either that was angelic intervention, or on the 3D level, it could have been the barbecue beans I had for dinner the night before. Hippo didn't want anything to do with that. But it was a traumatic experience. And Ann and I were literally sick for weeks after that because of the fear that had caused. And so by the time the coup d'etat occurred about 3-4 years later, we were a little bit more acclimatized with I saw people absolutely destroyed by that coup d'etat incident because there were people being burned to death. 2 Dutch people were killed, and they were looting, going to town, and we were hidden in our house. And this is an interesting story. We had a 24-hour guard working 12-hour shifts. And one of our guards was a man named Dabo. Didn't speak any English, spoke French. Very pure soul. He would work the daytime shift and would sometimes work in our garden for us. And during the 3 days in which everything was being burnt, Dabo got 6 of his friends and came and sat in front of our house. and prayed. And they all 6 were Muslim. And they saved our lives. And so that is a remarkable, remarkable story to remember. And I think of Dabo often. He literally saved us. But the fear was an incredible thing. So what can fracture the aura? Destructive emotions, negative conflicts, energy differentials like the Sedona thing. How many of you have been to Sedona? That's a perfect example for me of a purposed imbalance. That's a crucible energy. Sedona is not a place that's conducive to agreement. Although, I mean, if you've got something that you need to bubble up and deal with, go to Sedona, it'll come up. I mean, when you go there and then the implosion occurs and you start dealing with issues. And so there are a lot of sacred sites that have that energy. This is absolutely a time when it is essential to maintain Auric awareness. And this is a photo. This is an article that came out in the Scotland newspaper. Anne's mother, my wife's mother, sent that in there, and it was talking about the experience that we had in Africa, and were rescued. But what I learned was that fear can absolutely destroy you, and that you have to overcome it, and that by overcoming fear, you get back into that plane where you can operate effectively. And the effective use of gemstones. I want to talk just for another 5 or 10 minutes about the way that gemstones work. NASA has revealed that there is an incredible diamond of 10 billion trillion carats, too big to wear. It's crystallized carbon 4,000 kilometers across. And the way that they discovered it was is that it puts out a vibration. It pulses in rings. And that is evidence that diamonds and that certain gemstones issue not only light, but a pulse. And that's very, very important. So this shows that crystals and gems emit both waves and sound, and that they pulse frequencies and geocodes. They are highly organized molecularly. Now, I came up with the idea of the Metatronic shield, or at least that was given to me through the Metatronic readings. And here is how they work. I'm going to show you the map on the Metatronic shield. And this is, again, the Cayce reading. All gemstones, all crystals are part of the sacred geometry. I believe that the Metatronic shield will protect the auric field because I believe gemstones and crystals are light generators. And our etheric body, with its particle accelerators that carry us into the antimatter or angelic realm, gemstones will pulse energy, pulse light, and that is a fact. That diamond that's 4,000 miles across that NASA has discovered that I showed you in the earlier slide pulses a ring. We know that they're there. We can identify gemstones by the frequency of their pulses. So there are 2 different classes of gemstones. One is single refractive. And there are only 3 stones that are single refractive: diamond, garnet, and spinel. Everything else is double refractive. Single refractive means that light goes right through a gemstone in one singular beam. Double refractive, it gets split into negative and positive. So, I believe that double refractive gemstones are very, very effective in the duality realm, the realm of opposites, the realms of negative and positive. I believe that single refractive work more in the etheric realm, the angelic realm, the 0-point energy realm. So I think that if you wear a diamond garnet or spinel on one hand. It protects the auric energy in the etheric realm, and the double refractive in the physical realm. And I believe you wear a lapis pendant here, and lapis was recommended by Cayce more than any other stone to provide that protection, and you have that triangulation that you can see here. All right, here's an example of how single refractive and double refractive work. The diamond, again, according to the Cayce readings, needs to be at least 2 carats. Not small stones making 2 carats, but at least 2 carats. You can find a diamond that will work for you. But in case you can't afford a diamond, a garnet is very affordable. It's also single refractive. A little bit more expensive is the spinel, which usually comes in pink sort of colors. But garnet will absolutely work. The diamond has to be, in my opinion, 1 carat for every 60 pounds of body weight, but at least 2 carats. You know, someone like me needs a bigger diamond. And the double refractive stone needs to be, in my opinion, at least 3 carats, but probably 5 or more. And everything else is double refractive. And you can change out the double refractive. You can wear more than one, but you need that lapis in the center. This is important. So for the Metatronic shield, the diamond has to be at least 2 carats, the garnet 3 to 5, double refractive 3 to 5 carats. And this is important. They must be natural earth mined. Now you walk into a jewelry shop and you say, is this a real emerald? And they're going to tell you yes, but it may have been lab created, and so technically they're correct. It is chemically a real emerald, but it was made in a laboratory, and they do not carry the same energy. They do not carry the same life force and that same protective energy. It must be a natural earth mined, not lab created, and it must be at the very least translucent. You can't buy a black diamond that has no optical qualities because light doesn't pass through it. It has to be able to refract light. Transparent is best, translucent is necessity. Now, do you remember Aaron's breastplate in the Bible? And what did they do? They had 9 gems, and they had to wear it before they went where? Into the Holy of Holies in the Ark of the Covenant. How many of you have been to Egypt? You may have noticed on many of their temples that there were 2 spires that operate something like an anode and a cathode on a battery. Positive energy, negative energy, and they feed into the Holy of Holies. Our earth has that aspect of anode, cathode, and gemstones help stabilize it. But because the Ark of the Covenant had such powerful energy, they had to wear this shield before they could go in there. Why? Because it would strip away their aura. It would strip away their field because it was just too powerful of an energy. That mechanical differentiation would strip your aura. And there are other things that strip your aura as well. If you get really angry, if you don't know how to maintain your aura, even being around people that are depressed will drain you. We talked about Don Gennaro shooting fireballs and people attaching to your solar plexus, which I experienced when I lived in Brazil. That happens unconsciously. You go into a used car lot and a salesman who's really aggressive, certainly not an evil man, but he wants you to buy a car, wants you to do a specific thing. And the way that works is they attach to your solar plexus and they start trying to impose their will on you, but in a sense they're taking your energy. And so you have to guard against that, and you have to be aware that a lot of people do that unconsciously. If you're around somebody that's depressed, they're going to absolutely take your energy. If you take 2 glasses of water and put them in a vacuum, and one's 70 degrees Fahrenheit, the other one's 90, after a while they're both going to be 80. If you get a person with low energy, they're automatically attracted to people with higher energy, and if that person with the higher energy does not know how to protect their field, they're going to drain. And Cayce spoke a lot about the lapis lazuli being a stone of protection. And again, this is Cayce talking about the validity of this forgotten science. Gemstones are tools. Gemstones are light generators. Metatron tells me that the reason women live longer than men is because they wear diamonds. And if you notice, all of the pharaohs wore lapis lazuli and turquoise. The Pope wears amethyst and lapis lazuli. In the Vatican, there's an entire chapel made out of lapis lazuli. In Lisbon, Portugal, there's an entire chapel made out of lapis lazuli. If you go upstairs into that room, there is a 90-pound block of lapis lazuli paired with an incredible 600-pound crystal and an amethyst, and they work together. I'm asking Kevin about putting lasers in there. Why? Because lasers are coherent light, and coherent light is an incredible tool that I'll talk about in the second presentation this afternoon. Each element, each stone, each variation of stone has its own atomic movement held together by the units of energy that in the universe are concentrated in that activity. That's from Edgar Cayce. This is not folklore, people. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about azurite. This is crystalline azurite. This is the forbidden stone of mastery. Sidney Kirkpatrick wrote a brilliant article about it that Allison Parker Hendricks shared with me, and it's incredible. In 1934, and I'm going to end with this, Edgar Cayce was arrested in New York City for practicing medicine without a license. He faced bankruptcy, couldn't earn a living. He was in a state of confusion, desperation, unable to support his family, and facing criminal charges. He had the dark night of the soul and thought about quitting this incredible work. He was guided to make a pilgrimage to Bisbee, Arizona, and Nogales, Mexico. He made a 7,000 trip that became very interesting to the FBI and to the IRS in later years. And this is the route that he took. Now, when he was there, he was told to go to an area of azurite, to go into a cave, and he went with his friend. This is azurite. There are two remarkable pieces of this in their bookstore. And this is very, very rare. The reason it is rare is because it's generally too brittle to make into jewelry. And so no one minds it. But this is the ayahuasca of minerals. He was told by Spirit to go to a mine of azurite, right? And when he went there, his mother, who had died years before, physically materialized. And she came to him and told him, don't quit this work. It's going to help millions of people. Don't be desperate. Keep going. And she gave him a silver dollar. Cayce received then a message to go to Nogales, Mexico, to another azurite location. And it was specified that it had to be crystalline azurite, which is eroded copper. Lapis, he speaks about three forms of lapis: lapis lazuli, lapis linguis, and lapis ligarius. Two of them are copper derivatives. Malachite and azurite are very, very similar to turquoise and chrysocolla, but they are different. It may just be one atom here or there, but it is copper and electric. And this enhances vision. This stimulates the third eye in a very powerful way. It was called the forbidden stone of mastery, and not everyone among the Egyptians were allowed to use it. You had to be ready, because if you go into an out-of-body experience and aren't prepared for it, aren't strong enough to handle it, it's not going to be a good experience. But this is a very, very powerful gem, and you don't wear it 24/7. You wear it only with purposes for meditation. All right, so this is where I'm going to close, and we'll take our break. But lapis lazuli has pyrite. Pyrite is iron sulfide, and it forms incredible cubes. Pyrite, astonishing. And I believe that malachite and pyrite can be used to deflect the waves that come off of a computer. And I teach that in the Metatronic Keys course. The malachite is the copper derivative, and it is really a phrase before it comes to here. And this is the crystalline form of azurite. Lapis lazuli can be worn 24/7. Malachite can be worn 24/7. And azurite only for meditation. And so these are very, very powerful gems and stones to wear, and they are the basis of the Metatronic shield. I think in this time of polarity, in this time of shift, you absolutely need to have the awareness of this field around you because of the attachments that can occur and because of the spirals down that can occur, the polarity in this low gravity cycle. It doesn't take a lot of money to buy a garnet for the single refraction, an amethyst for the double refraction, and a lapis lazuli for the pendant. And that is the core. Wear 2 copper bracelets or any noble metal, and it will provide a protection of your field, a very, very strong protection. Now, all things help. Amber will help protect the field. Cayce talks about amber, but I think protect in a different way. And certain metals around the neck. Gold is very, very powerful. Diamond has more electrons than any other element on the earth. Light is slowed down by diamond. Light moves at 186,000 miles per second. Light gets cut in half to its speed. It gets cut down by more than 50% inside a diamond, and that's a university study from George Washington University Scientific Group. Diamonds can provide longevity. We'll take now a brief break, and then I'll start on the second moon of Atlantis. Thank you all.
Stimme. Sondern lasst uns angenehmer anstimmen und freudenvollere. Freude, schöner Götterfunken, Tochter aus Elysium. Wir betreten feuertrunken, himmlische dein Heiligtum, deine Zauber